At this particular point, I'd like to open nominations for governor. Do you have any nominations for gubernatorial candidate?
Yes, I would like to nominate Ken Krawchuk.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it. Oh, I can't see that further.
I'll second it.
Excellent. All residents seconded. Do we have any more candidates for governor? Hearing none, I would like to close nominations for governor. And all in favor of,
Can I speak for the nomination first?
no, you may not.
I speak against nomination.
Both speak for no.
All in favor of hoisting this bit of suffering on Ken Krawchuk's shoulders as he freely accepted it? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, let's congratulate our gubernatorial candidate, Ken Krawchuk. Now, sir, please.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, sir.
Really what I wanted to do was say a few words beforehand to give you an idea of what I was going to be doing as a candidate, so that way you can say, oh God, we're not going to let him do that. What I'd like to do is just to present my standard stump speech. About 10 minutes long. This is what I would give if I'm at a candidate's night or League of Women Voters or whatever it may be. And that way you get an idea of what I'll be saying out there on the campaign trail. Sound good? Thank you. Let's start at the beginning. My name is Ken Krawchuk. I am the Libertarian Party candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. I'm 60 years old. My 61st birthday is next Tuesday, just about my birthday now. And I've been married to my first wife, Roberta, now for, what, almost 37 years. You know, our kids pick on us because they say, all of our friends' parents are divorced, second marriages. What's wrong with you guys? I guess she hasn't gotten tired of me yet. She's laughing. I'm lucky. Professionally, I'm an information technology entrepreneur. I've been running my own company since the late 80s. I also hold 3 United States patents related to database theory, so if there are any geeks in the audience afterwards, maybe we can sit down and compare notes. I'm also an author. My first novel just came out last year. I happen to have it right here. It's called Atlas Snubbed. It's a parody sequel to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I call it my platform novel because a lot of the ideas that I'm running on are contained in this novel. I would highly suggest reading it. Atlas Snubbed. The big thing in here is the central theme of my campaign, which is the separation of society and state. And I can talk about that more a little bit later. I'm also a Toastmaster. Toastmasters, as you know, is an international organization whose mission is to provide a supportive environment for learning public speaking and leadership skills. I consider myself a product of that training, and I highly, highly recommend Toastmasters for everyone and anyone. We Libertarians have the best message on the planet, liberty. But if we can't communicate it, that message is not valuable. So that's something about myself. I'm a family man, businessman, author, inventor, Toastmaster, but most importantly, I'm a Libertarian. I've been a Libertarian since 1993. And as was mentioned, this is now my 3rd run for governor of Pennsylvania. I ran against Ed Rendell in 2002 and Tom Ridge in 1998. And I was the first Libertarian Party candidate to break the 1% barrier for the gubernatorial office. And I'm back. It's important to note that I'm a Libertarian because we Libertarians are different from the 2 old parties. We are the party of principle. Every law we support, every law we oppose, can all be traced back to one central idea. The idea that your life is yours, that your property is yours, that you have the God-given, inalienable right to live your life your way, without interference, provided only you respect the rights and property of others. That's it. That's what it means to be a Libertarian. Your life, your way. It's the golden rule on a political level. And the public has reacted very strongly to this message. Since our founding in 1971, we have grown to become the 3rd largest party, hands down, outnumbering all of the other 3rd parties put together. That's true when you look at voter registration or also elected and appointed officials. The last set of numbers I saw say we have about 150 Libertarians serving in public office nationwide and about 40 here in Pennsylvania. And again, that outnumbers all the other third parties put together. I call this in the political scene, the 800-pound chihuahua. So there's a little bit about me, a little bit about the Libertarian Party. Let me tell you what you can expect from a Libertarian governor. Obviously, you're going to get somebody who's going to respect your right to live your life your way. And the best way to do that is by paying attention to my job description, the Constitution of Pennsylvania. Something they don't teach in the schools. Several ways that I can use this job description, and let me hit a few specific issues. As I travel the state, people are always asking me questions, and the question I get hit with the most is about taxes. Taxes are too high. Who thinks taxes are too low? Well, I'm very true, aren't I? Of course taxes are high, and they're getting higher. The reason why taxes are so high is because spending is so high. And the reason why spending is so high is because politicians are glad-handing your money all over the Commonwealth. Unconstitutional programs, pork barrel programs, one after the other. In fact, it's gotten so bad that the size of government, the cost of government in Pennsylvania has been rising at more than 3 times the rate of inflation for over 50 years. It doesn't matter if it's been a Republican in office or a Democrat. It doesn't matter if it's the high inflation rate of the Carter years. It doesn't matter if it's low inflation rate. It doesn't matter if it's good times or bad times. 3 times the rate of inflation, more than that, over the last 50 years. 12 years ago when I ran for governor the last time, I stood up here and I said, for the last 40 years it's been growing 3 times faster than the rate of inflation. Here it is 50 years later and nothing has changed. That's one of the main reasons why I'm running, is because it's time to end that trend. And when I'm governor, I will be able to do that, single-handedly, because of the powers granted to me by this Constitution. Specifically, the power of the veto. I promise I will veto every single tax increase, bar none. It's time we stop the growth of government. The new budget just introduced by Governor Corbett, another 6%. You know what rate of inflation is? About 1/3 that. So it's still galloping along at 3 times the rate of inflation. Not a good idea. It's not just the veto, because there's another power given to the governor, the line item veto. And I plan to use that aggressively. If there's something unconstitutional, like for example that registry of gun owners that the state police likes to have, I'm going to defund it. If there's something the Commonwealth just doesn't need, like say the Milk Marketing Board or any of these alphabet soup agencies, line item veto, I'm going to get rid of funding for each one of them. And with the savings from that, I'm going to turn around and we are going to eliminate the personal income tax in Pennsylvania over the course of 4 years. Reduce it one step each of the 4 years. So that's my plan to attack taxes by attacking spending, by using the power of the veto. It'll take a supermajority to override that veto, and maybe some of them will be overridden, but you can guarantee that not all of them will. The size of Pennsylvania's government is guaranteed to drop. So that's issue number 1, taxes. Issue number 2, as I travel the state, I hear is crime. Crime, it's high, but we can do something about crime. A study by the Commonwealth Foundation in Harrisburg found that 95% of all crimes are committed by only 5% of the criminals. Well, again, turning to a power that's given to me that I can use unilaterally, I can reduce crime in Pennsylvania. And the way to do that is to eliminate parole for violent criminals. I think it's insane to let these guys out of jail, especially after we finally get them in there through our convoluted criminal justice system. So when I'm governor, all violent criminals will serve every single day of their sentence. Now it's guaranteed to get these bad guys off the street. And since 95% of the crimes are committed by these 5% of the people, we're guaranteed to reduce crime. Now a lot of times when I travel the state, people say, oh come on Ken, where are you going to put all these bad guys? You're going to build new prisons? It's already taken up like 11% of the state budget. No, it's an easy answer, because there are a lot of people in prison right now who don't belong there. I'm talking specifically about non-violent drug offenders. Right now, the last number I saw, roughly 17% of Pennsylvania's prison population are non-violent drug offenders. Again, turning to my job description, I'm going to use the power of the pardon. I'm promising my first day in office to get the ball rolling to pardon all non-violent drug offenders. These people don't belong in jail. It's costing $30,000, $40,000 a year to keep a pot smoker in prison. How many people think a pot smoker belongs in jail? Again, I'm in the right room, huh? You know, in 2002, as I traveled the state, I asked that of everybody, every audience that I went to, and I counted the number of hands. And by election day, I had 38. Out of the thousands of people that I talked to, 38 people believe that pot smokers belong in prison. Well, that trend is also going to end. Because right now, our prisons are very overcrowded, especially in areas like Philadelphia. In fact, it's reached the point where we are releasing from our overcrowded prisons murderers and rapists to make room for pot-smoking Grateful Dead fans. That's insane! So when I'm governor, using the power of the pardon, we're going to get those guys out of there. So if somebody's just sitting back, smoking a joint, watching The Simpsons, they have a get-out-of-jail-free card from this governor. And it's not just potheads. Anybody who is convicted of a non-crime, for example, let's say that they were carrying a firearm responsibly, they didn't have the proper piece of government paper. As long as they're a responsible gun owner, I'll be pardoning those people as well. Generally speaking, if there's no victim, there is no crime. So generally speaking, that's how I would attack the crime issue. Keep the bad guys in jail, get the good guys out of jail. And also save all that money that we're wasting on this insane war on drugs, and we'll be able to eliminate the Pennsylvania personal income tax that much faster. The third issue that I hear about all the time on the campaign trail, maybe I should have mentioned this first, is education. Education in Pennsylvania needs a lot of work. There's no question about that. But what do we do about education? If you look at the numbers, roughly 95% of all of our kids all go to the same school system, the government school system. It's a virtual monopoly. And like all monopolies, the costs are high, the choice is low, and the quality not always exactly what it should be. When I'm governor, I will work to eliminate that monopoly. And I'm going to eliminate it by bringing in somebody who has been ignored in the debate so far. The parents. Remember them? They're the ones who got the kids in the first place. Specifically, what I would like to see done is that the parents can choose any government school for their children. And the funding, which would have gone to their local school, will follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. That way, good schools will get more funding and grow, and bad schools will get less funding and be forced to close down. So that way, with the same amount of educational money, we can improve our educational system by growing the good schools. Now, note one thing. When I say improve education, I'm not talking about my opinion of improving education. I'm not talking about some unelected Board of Education's opinion. I'm not talking about some out-of-state Common Core standards opinion. I'm talking about the opinion of the people who matter most, the parents. So if the parents think a school is good, that school will grow. If parents believe in merit pay, then they'll be going to schools with merit pay. Whatever it may be, the parents will decide, and we will be able to break this government monopoly that the government has. Thank you very much. So there are three issues. I could talk about issues up here all day, and sometimes I have. I know. The longest public appearance I did once was with the Southern Christian Ministries, and that was 4 hours. I went on for quite a while. That was fun. But I could talk about a lot of other issues. I could talk about jury nullification, very important thing, our fourth branch of government. I could talk about how I plan to defuse the abortion debate, many, many different things. But let me just suggest that instead of wasting all of our time here, that you go out and visit my website and read up on some of these things. kenk.org, kenk.org. It's one of the few remaining 4-letter domains in the world. Easy to type, easy to remember. I also have Krawchuk.com, but nobody can spell it, it seems. So kenk.org is my website. Now, a lot of people, when they listen to these things, they nod their heads. They say, yeah, Ken, we've got to cut taxes. taxes are way too high in Pennsylvania. For every $100 that was taken from your average Pennsylvanian in 1964, they're taking $2,200 today. We've got to stop that. And Ken, you're right. We got to keep these bad guys in prison, and you're right. Pot smokers don't belong in prison. And Ken, you're absolutely right. We've got to get parents to decide what's best for their kids, not some bureaucrats. But Ken, get real. You're not going to win. But wait a minute. I can win. Let me tell you how. If you crunch the numbers, you can come out with an interesting equation. Because the two old parties have disillusioned so many voters that right now, in a Pennsylvania gubernatorial race, you can expect a turnout of maybe 30, 35%, maybe 40% if it's a really big election. But if you crunch the numbers, you'll find out that all it takes to secure a Libertarian victory in a competitive three-way race is for us to attract the vote of 1 out of 8 voting age Pennsylvanians. 1 out of 8 is all it takes. So if you're in a room and there are 8 people sitting there and they laugh at the idea of parents deciding their own children's education, if they laugh at the idea of letting potheads out of prison, but one of them sits there and says, yeah, that's a good idea. That's all it takes. 1 out of 8. It's my goal to strain to reach that 1 out of 8, and we have to do it. We have to do it for the future of Pennsylvania, for our children, for grandchildren, and my wife and I, we have a grandchild on the way right now. Now that I'm going down south. But we have to do it, because if Pennsylvanians keep on voting the way they've been voting, they're going to keep on getting just what they've been getting. And I don't know about you, but I have had enough. Thank you for your attention. He says I have some time for Q&A. Any questions? Yes, Jim.
If you're improving government schools, won't more people want to send their kids to them?
Oh, geez. Well, 95% of the kids are already going there, and I think the other 5%, it'd be pretty hard to shake their faith in the private school system.
What can we do to get people more out of that system and into homeschool or private education?
Well, as governor, it's not my authority to be able to convince people to how to educate their children. In fact, it's my agenda to increase the choice that parents have. So it's not my decision, Jim. We use a parent. Let me ask you.
Well, what about mandatory attendance laws, things like that?
For children?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I would. Well, let me back up. That is covered by the legislature. So it's not something that's granted to me as a power in the Constitution. But I think that mandatory attendance laws are counterproductive. There's a lot of children that would get by with homeschooling, and that's just a fact. Anybody who's met any homeschooled children know that they perform way above the national average. So I'm definitely in favor of homeschooling, and if there are bills that are written along those lines, anything to improve educational diversity, educational choice, I'd be in favor of that. Good question, thank you. Someone had a hand over here? What other question, please?
I'll ask one. So one of the spending issues that's becoming more and more of an issue is pensions. Pensions
Oh,
for
pension,
government employees.
yes.
Is there anything as governor you can do to address that issue? Because I know you want to address spending. That seems to be
Yep.
a key problem with spending that's going to just continue to spiral out of control.
Correct, there's $47 billion, I believe, right now is the current overhang on that. Well, let me address that in 2 parts. How it happened, and then what we can do. First reason how it happened is because somebody didn't read their Constitution. Toward the back here, I believe it's, oh, I'm not going to remember the exact section, shame on me. I think it's Article 9, Section 9, says that the Commonwealth cannot invest in any private companies. So what happened, what was it, about 10 years ago? There's a huge drop in the market, and all of a sudden that triggered off the initial pension crisis. By violating the law, they exposed themselves to the problem that we have today. So it is a problem of their own making. So that's how we got here, by ignoring the Constitution. And let me just say parenthetically, that when I go to schools, I ask, who's read this Pennsylvania Constitution? Let me ask that here, who's read the Constitution? at that, more than half, because I love libertarian organizations. And you're an attorney, you don't count. But when I go to the schools, nobody raises their hands. And I said, what's the matter? Isn't this a government school? And they don't teach you how the government operates? And the government controls the schools, lock, stock, and barrel. They say who can teach, who can't teach, what the curriculum is, what it shouldn't be, how many days they should be there. And with all that power, they don't bother teaching the Constitution. So it's no wonder that we're in the pension crisis that we are. Because I'm sure none of those people have ever read the Constitution. And I'm sure they have some lawyers saying, oh, well, it's not really the Commonwealth, it's really the teachers' union, and if the teachers work for the Commonwealth. Don't go wordsmithing at me. Well, anyway, that's how we got into the mess. The way we get out of the mess is the same way that corporate America got out of that mess. By going from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan, 401k, just like I bet most of us in this room have. And that's what I would like to see done going forward. Thank you. Yes, Sean, you go first.
Ken, we're interested in creating jobs through letting farmers grow hemp. And in Pennsylvania, apparently the Department of Agriculture has cannabis sativa listed as a noxious weed. Is there anything that you can do as governor to help facilitate this, correct this, to get it going quicker versus the studies that they want to do? The federal government's saying that they want the states that are able to grow hemp or cannabis to be able to study it, but we want to get to work versus doing everything that the rest of the world is already doing. What can you, as our gubernatorial candidate, or when we elect you, Governor, what can you do?
I have a very easy answer to that. Something I can do unilaterally here. Let's say that you're a hemp farmer, and all of a sudden the man comes down on you. I just pardon you. Then they come down on your neighbor hemp farmer, and I pardon him. After 3, 4, 5 of these people, they're going to say, why are we wasting time hassling these hemp farmers? Because Ken's just going to pardon them. And eventually they're going to get the message and say, we're going to take our scarce resources and we're actually going to go after real criminals. Not people who grow hemp, not people who sell raw milk, not people who sell lemonade with their kids. We're going to go after real criminals, violent criminals. So there's something I can do unilaterally. Richard.
Yeah, I think we've gotten into some problems when we assume that, every case that comes before a court is different. They all may have their extenuating circumstances, and we've run into a lot of problems with these one-size-fits-all mandatory minimums. And I just like to know how you're going to address that with this elimination of parole. That just seems a bit much for a situation where parole might be somebody who really wasn't that bad, their only hope to get out.
That is true. And there are a lot of problems with our judicial system. And being in the executive branch of government, there's not much that I can do to control what the judicial branch does. Of course, if there's some kind of a law that comes down the line, like mandatory minimums or something like that, I would certainly veto that. Because, as you say, we should have the flexibility, the judicial system should have the flexibility to deal with people on a case-by-case basis. And there's also been a lot of corruption in the courts, no doubt about that. Pay for play, and what was the one where the juvenile court where the judge was taking kickbacks from the local...
Kids for cash.
That's kids for cash. Terrible things that are going on in the judicial system. Richard, I would suggest that you run for Supreme Court or Superior Court so you can address that problem directly. And there's one other thing I should add about our criminal justice system. It's very, very racist. The latest numbers I have show that for every white person who goes to jail, 15 minorities go to jail. And when you look at the 18 to 25-year-old age bracket, it's 55 to 1. This is incredible. The injustice in our justice system is an injustice in Pennsylvania. Let me sweep across the room. Questions? Yes, who's that? Drew.
Yes. Ken, how do you, as governor, balance the needs of private business with the needs of the environment? Like specifically with the issues with fracking?
Definitely. I can answer that in a general way, and then we can dig down into the specifics. As a libertarian, I believe you have the right to live your life your way without interference, provided only that you respect the rights and property of others. So whatever sort of business enterprise you have, whether it's growing hemp, whether it's fracking, whether it's driving your car around, right? I don't care what it is. You have to respect the environment. In fact, the Constitution in Article 1 says it's the state's trust to take care of the environment, and I believe in that firmly. What I would like to do is change the way that we look at the environment. Right now they have all sorts of micromanaging. You could have so many particles of this, that, and the other thing. And then if you have a certain amount of pollution, well, that's okay. No. What I'm going to do, I want to come at the other point from a different point of view. I would like to see all sorts of pollution treated as a trespass. So that means if somebody's stuff is leaking onto your property, if their fracking is leaking into your water table, whatever it might be, you can move against them just like you would a trespasser, somebody who steps onto your property without your permission. At that point, you would have all the remedies open to you that are currently open against trespassers. For example, you get an injunction to shut them down. You could tell them to get their mess off your property, and they're going to have to pay for the cleanup. It's just a completely different way of looking at these things. And right now, in Pennsylvania, let's say you bought a piece of property, and it turns out it's polluted, and you know who you bought it from, and the guy polluted it. He's not responsible for it. You are, because you're the last guy in line. We've got to change that too. So there's two things that I would like to do. The main one, though, is to treat pollution as a trespass. Coming across the room. Yes, Ed.
Ken, one of the things that's a hot political debate right now is the right to marry who you want to marry. And I know a lot of libertarians, most libertarians believe that, any two people could marry. My concern with being the governor of Pennsylvania and the religious freedoms, there was a religion where the prophecies of that religion were written in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania, the Book of Mormon. And they get chased out of the state because Christians that had one wife did not like Christians who had multiple wives. Do you support polygamy and any sort of marriage that people would like, whether it's a man and a woman, a man and a man, a man and a woman, a man, two women? I mean, this is history of our state.
Yeah. Let me address that the same way I like to start with everything, because we are the party of principle, and you have the right to live your life as you see fit without interference, provided you respect the rights and property of your neighbor. It is none of my business who you love, and who am I to get in the way of true love? Because from my point of view, what's good for the goose and the gander is good for the goose and the goose, and the gander and the gander. And the gander who used to be a goose, and the goose who dresses like a gander, or whatever combination. I don't think government has any role at all in marriage. Should we legalize gay marriage? No, it's not a question of legalizing gay marriage. It's getting government out of it. More important than solving the problem correctly is to solve the right problem. And the problem here is government and their marriage licenses. Do you know that marriage licenses were originally instituted to prevent interracial marriages? And now they've extended it to everybody. And my wife and I mean, I was raised Catholic and she was raised Methodist. Do we need a license for that? No. What I would like to see instead is the government to protect and defend the rights of the citizens. So that would mean that if my wife and I decide we're going to share our life together and mix our resources, raise our family and our grandkids, then the government should be able to support that. So what I would like to see is that the government define certain legal rights. Don't call it marriage. I don't know what to call it. I hate to call it civil union because that carries a little bit of baggage on its own. Make up any word you want for it. But what it would mean is that we would now share rights of inheritance, medical power of attorney, and all those boons which are granted to married people. And if we want something, fine. If we don't, well, we don't. It could be up to us, to you, when you get into a relationship, what that would be. And if it's going to be two wives, Ed, that's up to you. Again, who am I to get in the way of truth? Come around. Yes?
You mentioned education before and getting the power more into the hands of the parents. I have a question. Currently, right now, the public education system is funded by property taxes, which It's pretty much based on the assumption that because you own property, you have income, which obviously always isn't the case. I mean, somebody may have lost their job recently, or they may have had medical problems, or they may just be retired and they just can't afford these ever-increasing property taxes. What would you do if you would do anything as far as to take away the power that allows the government to steal people's homes and kick people out of their homes and kick families to the curb in order to fund this education system that not everybody believes in and not everybody supports and not everybody can even afford?
Well, the general answer is there's nothing I can do unilaterally. There's nothing in my job description which allows me to go in there and tell local municipalities I can or cannot levy certain taxes. And I agree with you, property tax has to be one of the most onerous taxes because we're tossing people out in the streets. I would like to see property taxes eliminated. I do not think that HB 76 is the best way to go because what that does is that shifts the property tax over to the sales tax. Doesn't solve the problem. Education costs are way too high. And what that's going to do is that's just going to hide the problem. But one of the things that I campaigned on in 2002, it was viable then, it's even more viable now, is that we should decriminalize marijuana here in Pennsylvania like they're doing in other states. Let me finish. Because we can eliminate property taxes based on that. So let's say, for example, we kept the street price the same. What's the street price for an ounce of pot these days? I don't know.
Too expensive.
Let's pull a number out of the air just for point of argument. Let's say $100 an ounce. I think it's probably a lot higher than that by now. But $100 an ounce. The cost of production of marijuana is about the same as the cost of production for a pack of cigarettes. Probably less because pot's a weed. It grows a lot easier than tobacco. You don't need those fancy shielded fields or anything. So let's say the cost of production is $1 a pack. If we kept the price, the street price the same, that leaves $99 that we could have as a tax on marijuana. And with that $99, according to Project Dawn, run by the government, federal government, it's probably around 15 years ago, they said there are millions of people in Pennsylvania who smoke pot. So if you multiply that tax that we get it, we can come out, the last number that I worked out was about almost $1 billion that we could come up with, just if we legalized marijuana here and kept the street price the same. So we could take that money, let's decriminalize pot, put a tax on it, and use that money to eliminate property taxes across Pennsylvania. Now, when I brought this up in 2002, there were some libertarians who said, a libertarian authorizing a tax? Oh God! But think about it. Right now, if you get caught with a joint, let's say that you lend your car to your teenage son, and one of his buddies drops a roach in the back seat. Next morning you're driving to work, cop pulls you over for a headlight out or something like that, and he sees that roach. He could seize your car, seize your house, take all your life assets, and you lose your job. There's an infinite tax on marijuana right now. What I'm proposing is that we reduce it to the street price minus the cost of production. One step at a time. We got here many steps, but let's reduce them one step at a time. And there's somebody who hasn't asked the question yet.
I just want to follow up with you.
Okay. All right, Steve is telling me I'm running out of time here.
One last question.
Let me follow up, Ken. Before you go out there and start proposing that type of stuff out to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're interested in repealing the restrictions prohibiting our farmers from growing hemp and cannabis. And if you want to grow cannabis in your own backyard, you should be able to do that.
I agree.
Your premise is that the state is going to control production of cannabis. Okay, that doesn't work like the liquor store production doesn't cost. We want to lower the cost, and we don't want to tax people that want cannabis for medicines and things of that nature. So pick another subject, fund education, like lower the taxes, so I voluntarily pay for my daughter to go to school, which I have no issue doing that, versus taxing the plant. Yeah, everybody's looking at like gambling's gonna solve this and.
Yep.
No offense, but before you go out and start pitching that, I wouldn't suggest pitching that marijuana is an answer to.
Well, I may take 3 steps, guy, instead of doing an all at once sort of approach. If you're looking to do an all at once sort of approach, why don't you run for governor? And so you can join Richard when he runs for the Supreme Court.
We're working local, we'll just continue our local thing.
Good for you. All right, and I know you're gonna ask about the right to keep bear arms.
No, I'm not, actually. One of the things that I think kind of hobbles the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is the fact that a lot of businesses will not move here because we have the second highest corporate tax rate in the country.
Yep.
What would you do as governor to make Pennsylvania more business friendly?
Well, the best thing to do is to eliminate those corporate taxes. The question is, how do you pay for all the services that they're currently going for? And one thing that I mentioned in my introductory stump speech, which I haven't gone into, is the separation of society and state. Right now, the state has taken on so many societal functions, things that are properly the role of society, like taking care of the elderly, taking care of the sick, PACE program, things like that. Well, what I would like, well, in fact, it's reached a point now where roughly 80% of our state budget is dedicated to giveaway programs. And it's getting out of control. At the federal level, it's even worse because all federal revenue now, virtually all federal revenue is going to pay for the welfare state. In Pennsylvania, 80% is going for various giveaway programs. But if we separate society and state, we can take those well-meaning programs and have them administered by a different organization. I call it society. Society would look just like government. It would have a constitution. It would look virtually identical to what we have now. So there would be a governor of society, a state house of society. But the key difference between society and the state is that society would not have the coercive power of taxation. So if they wanted to pass a PACE program, instead of reaching into our taxpayers' pockets to pay for their goodness, they would have to ask for contributions voluntarily. They would have to have fund drives, bake sales, telethons. And if they didn't have enough money, they would have to do what you and I have to do. Prioritize our spending. Say, these are the ones that are more important. So that way we would be able to maintain our safety net for the people who are truly needy, but also start cutting off these people who are taking advantage of the system, just because we'd be a little more careful with how we spend our money, simply because it'd be voluntary. Time has come to separate society and state, because otherwise the cost of maintaining all these programs, these societal programs, it's bankrupting us. As I said, 80% of our budget right now is dedicated to these giveaway programs. So if we separated society and state, that way society could pass all of these various programs, whether it's the PACE program, whether it's education, whether it's a milk marketing board, maybe it's junkets overseas. But if the people who are contributing the money don't want to contribute to that, they won't. And society will get that message. So society can pass any kind of a law at once. I call them guidelines, because they don't have the power of law. They can't force you to contribute. So that's what I'd like to see. And that is the theme of my novel. I would suggest reading it because this goes into the details of how the separation of society and state works. Because it has very, very far-reaching implications, not only for welfare, but also for regulation. Because society is the one who should be doing regulations. For example, can we smoke in this hotel? No. Whose decision is that? Well, the state said so. Well, what if the hotel wants to cater to smokers? It should be the hotel's decision. So if there's a regulation saying no smoking, society should pass that. And since it's society passing it, and society has no coercive powers, that regulation will be voluntary. So if somebody wants to advertise, hey, we meet all society's regulations, there's no smoking in here, we have certain firmness of beds, we have certain heights of toilets, and all these other regulations that exist, they could advertise that. We're societally approved. And if not, well, then they don't. They say, no, we follow all of society's regulations except maybe our toilets are a little bit smaller, or whatever it may be. That way, that would encourage innovation, because you're not hamstrung into a one-size-fits-none approach. So we separate society and state, we maintain our safety net with voluntary contributions, we maintain our safety with voluntary regulations, and you, the individual, can choose which things you want to fund, which businesses you want to patronize. So if you want to go to a place that sells raw milk, go to a place that sells raw milk. If you want to go to a bar where they allow smoking, go to a bar that allows smoking. If you want to go to a homeopathic doctor, go to a homeopathic doctor. But you'll be able to make informed decisions, because those who comply with society's regulations could say so, and those who don't want to just wouldn't. Separation of society and state, Atlas Snubbed. I highly recommend it. 15 minutes or 5 minutes. Let me end by saying, thank you for the nomination. I will do my best. I will tear up more dollar bills. I always have one handy. I'm not going to do it right now. I will be in the debate, and I can't wait to get Governor Corbett over the coals like I did with Ed Rendell. Remember Ed Rendell? One of the debates I was allowed to ask a question. And I said, Ed, you've been calling for gun purchase limits, 1 a month. But the Constitution, Article 1, Section 21 says, the right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. Now, I have no question what that means, but I said, Mr. Rendell, what are you going to honor? Your oath to the Constitution or your promise to the anti-gun lobby? He looked at me and said, I believe we should have reasonable limits on gun purchases. I tried, and I'll try again this year. Thank you for your nomination. I will do my best.